Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Max Verstappen dominates another race weekend, but behind him loads of interesting storylines developing, with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell outclassing all other competition for their first double podium of the season. Mercedes, Toto Wolff says this validates their development direction, and they now find themselves well on the path to closing the gap to the Red Bulls. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Let's dive right in here because loads of things happened at the start of the race. Maybe I'll give this race a 3 stars. At least there were 2 stops. I'll give it that. Pirelli weren't super fortunate. It does blow my mind how often you'll see this, right? The tyre strategies for the Grand Prix. And I think Red Bull might have been able to one-stop this. I actually think it was part of their plan to potentially one-stop. In the end, it wasn't necessary for Verstappen. They went medium hard. He might have been able to go to the end on those tyres, which would have been pretty embarrassing for Pirelli, but it was a 2-stop or even a 3-stop for some teams. So it was at least nice to see. Russell was doing a little bit of acceleration before it even began, but the race began, and this is what was going on at the start. So there was, again, a turn 1 incident with Verstappen. I mean, it wasn't really too much of an incident. He pushed Sainz all the way to the limit. Sainz had to back out of it. Russell actually went off the track here before making up some massive moves, actually, going down into turn 4. Hamilton was collected briefly by Norris. A bit weird what happened at the front there. So Verstappen and Sainz, because they were, a bit of a mistake was made. Hamilton got a bit boxed in, had to back out. Then he decided to try and take the outside line round turn 3, and then Norris clipped him, broke his own front wing. Honestly, I thought Hamilton was going to get a puncher from that for the second lap 1 at Spain running up, and last year, if you guys remember with, I think it was Kevin Magnussen, when then Hamilton made the mega recovery drive from the back of the grid. But this affected Norris more so on this occasion, probably just a racing instant, but I think Norris could have maybe been more careful there. And yeah, Hamilton lucky to escape window puncture. Norris has to pit for a new front wing, and man, the McLaren race pace was absolutely non-existent. I mean, Norris from P3 to like P17 or something. It was absolutely disaster. So Verstappen, as you can already see, streaking away. If Sainz had got him into turn 1, he'd have maybe lasted 2 laps out there, because Verstappen started on the mediums, as did Perez, pretty much the only drivers to do so on the grid. So they thought they could go long, and even if they lost a position on the start, they'd be okay. And that's basically exactly what's happened here, right? This was from Norris's perspective. Hamilton decided to go around the outside, and yeah, Norris kind of found himself going a bit too fast, broke his own front wing, far from ideal. He had to box. Perez was making some moves, but definitely slower than he would have wanted to. He definitely made some progress, but far from the rate that he would need to if he wanted to make anything happen. Russell made some good passes as well through the field, so it was quite clear from relatively early on that Mercedes had pace, and shortly after this, Hamilton got the move done on Stroll, and then very quickly after got the move done on Sainz. At this point, Sainz was around about 6-7 seconds behind Verstappen, so if Hamilton had started front row, as he was very close to doing, you know, you can argue that at the end of this race, the Mercedes of Hamilton would have only been 15 seconds behind Max, which, okay, it's not exactly super close, but that would have been the closest we've seen so far this year, right? Now, it's technically not, based on what we'll see in a second. I will also mention what's going on with Ferrari, man. They bring their new upgrades this weekend. Leclerc is nowhere, has problems with his car in qualifying, starts from the pit lane, actually, in the end, just because they, I guess, couldn't figure out what was wrong. They took the car apart, they put it back together again. Leclerc started from the pit lane and made a little bit of progress, did 17 laps on hards. I thought if they were starting on hards, go like 35 laps if you can, and then, you know, just try and overcut everyone, right? Get in some clean air, see what happens. But no, they pit him after 17 laps for softs, and then he's back on hards again at the end of the race, finishes P11 in the end, Leclerc. But I just feel like, man, get this poor guy out of this team, honestly. So it was pretty interesting, actually, because we were like 20 laps in, and the soft tyre was holding up surprisingly well. I think the track conditions helped the teams here, because definitely tyre deg was and is an issue around this circuit, but it was cool relative to what it could have been. Rain was kind of in the air, like people were wondering whether it was going to happen or not. It never did, but the cooler temperatures did mean that the tyres could last a bit longer. Hamilton eventually pitted, came out a few seconds behind Sainz, but on much fresher medium rubber. And when they went to the mediums, I did wonder if Mercedes would actually bolt on the hards and think about whether they could potentially try and go to the ends, because there was a part of this race, while these questions are being raised here by Russell, that Perez had gone medium hard, and I thought they were going to try and go to the end of the race with Perez, and if that had been the case, Mercedes on the 2-stop would have needed to pass Perez on track again. I'm not sure Russell would have managed it, maybe he would have done, I think Hamilton would have managed it, but I just wanted to see, like, you know, Mercedes versus Red Bull on track, fight for position with Hamilton trying to get the move done with DRS, because it's very rare a Red Bull ever gets overtaken nowadays, and it could have happened had Red Bull opt for the 1-stop, but they didn't decide to. Perez made some progress here. At this point in the race, Russell was closing down Sainz very rapidly. Also, the Aston Martins. Alonso didn't really have any pace at the start. It came towards him a bit more towards the ends. He was on the softs in the middle stint, which was a bit strange. And Stroll was doing a pretty respectable job, but yeah, no real pace from the Aston. So this is a race weekend generally at Spain that exacerbates how good or bad the car is. If your car is bad, you'll see it at Spain. If your car is good, you'll definitely see it at Spain. And in the past, we've had gaps that are like every car is 10 seconds ahead of every other car because that's just what this circuit tends to do. And we saw Ferrari absolutely miles behind Red Bull, as were Aston Martin. So for Mercedes to be this competitive, and yes, Toto Wolff, we'll see in a second, he says, look, these track conditions suited us very nicely with the temperatures and all this, but it was very impressive as a thumbs up for the upgrades of Mercedes that with Aston Martin and Ferrari where they were, for Mercedes to be where they are. And Russell makes a good move here on Sainz. I mean, Sainz I thought briefly thought he could hold on, but it didn't happen. So with 20 laps to go, Mercedes committed to the two-stop strategy, went on to the soft tyres, and had a bit of a gap. Well, he was behind Perez at the time and managed to come out ahead of Perez, was trying to hunt down Perez actually, close in a few seconds. I think then Red Bull realised this isn't maintainable till the end of the Grand Prix, so they also came into the box, as did Lewis Hamilton, and at this point for Red Bull, it's like, well, we can take a free stop with Verstappen, maintain P1 guaranteed, and let Verstappen go for the fastest lap, which is what he eventually did, to secure the Grand Chelem. Pole position, lead every lap, and fastest lap. Ocon, man, what is this guy's problem with Alonso? He tried to chuck him onto the grass again here. Like, I don't know what it is with the defense from Ocon here, because it was so unnecessary as well, given the fact that Alonso had clearly more pace and was lapping way faster. So Ocon tries to, I don't know what it is between these two guys, but they can't get away from some drama. So anyway, these were the lap times happening around about 59 here on all the soft tyres. So Hamilton was significantly faster than Russell. He was really worrying about defending from Perez. Verstappen and Hamilton, 3-4 tenths difference in it, something like that, which is pretty impressive for the Mercedes, it's got to be said, given how dominant the Red Bull is. Yes, Verstappen was chilling, obviously, but still, I mean, he wasn't actually chilling that much because he was exceeding track limits at times and was close to getting a 5-second penalty. One more track limit excursion, and he would have done, didn't matter, of course, even if he had done it, he could have exceeded track limits another 10 times, and he still would have won the Grand Prix. This, though, was a penalty that, I think it was the only penalty already instant of the race. No safety cars, no VSCs, no real yellow flags or anything, but there was a 5-second time penalty for Tsunoda. I hope they appeal this, man, because Tsunoda and Zhou had a great race. I am not convinced that Tsunoda forced Zhou off the track. I think it was actually very similar to lap 1 between Verstappen and Sainz. When Verstappen used up all the roads, Sainz had to slot in behind him. Zhou, in this case, went to the escape road. I think, to be honest, it was just hard and fair racing. It was aggressive from Yuki, but I don't think it was out of the realms of possibility. I think we've seen those incidents before go entirely unpunished. So, yeah, maybe it's the layman stewards, as Gunther Steiner would say, making a questionable decision. I think this was harsh, personally, especially because if the stewards really thought that it was unfair, they could have said, all right, Yuki, you've got to give the place back to Zhou, right? Or give the position to Zhou, and then it would have been Zhou Tsunoda, and Tsunoda still finishes in the points. But he doesn't. He gets demoted with the 5-second penalty behind Gasly and finishes, I believe, P12. So, yeah, I kind of hope that they appeal that, actually, because I don't think that was entirely justified. I feel like they were just looking for penalties to give out because they had nothing better to do on the day, and this is with a couple of laps to go. Verstappen had already, at this point, put in the fastest lap at a 16.3. But, look, Verstappen 18.5, Hamilton 18.5, Russell 18.9, Perez was closing a bit, so, the pace between the Mercedes and the Red Bulls wasn't incredibly dissimilar. There was a brief period where I was concerned that Perez would get the driver of the day, because taking by far the fastest car in Formula 1 and what will become, by the history books, one of the most, if not the most, to be honest, dominant Formula 1 car we've ever seen over its competitors, to P4, it's not massively impressive, right? So eventually Hamilton actually gets driver of the day, but Verstappen wins again, his 3rd win in a row, another Grand Slam for him, I believe his 3rd of his career, and this is the distance over the next best car in each Grand Prix. Bahrain was 39 seconds, Saudi was still technically the closest over their nearest rival Alonso, but here it was over Mercedes, 24 seconds. Toto Wolff reckons that it could have been less. Got to give credit to Verstappen, of course, for leading literally every session of the weekend. It's pure dominance. FP1, FP2, FP3, quali race, and fastest lap. He did everything this weekend. Perez can get nowhere near him, and the championship is well and truly over. But, yeah, no yellow flags. I don't know why this is happening so often. No retirements as well. No red flags, no VSC. Nothing happened in the race from that perspective. There was some interesting strategies. It would have been nice if it had rains. But the big talking point for me is the battle now for P2 in the Constructors. Mercedes have overtaken Aston Martin for second place in the Constructors, and I don't expect them to rescind this now. Their car looks more competitive, especially this weekend where, okay, it's been good in the past here. This has always been a good track for Mercedes, but it is usually a very good indicator of how good your car is. It's a test track for a reason, typically in Formula 1. So yes, they're miles behind Red Bull, but of the three teams behind them, Mercedes are by far the most likely right now, I believe, to make it through to second in the Constructors. And that's what Toto Wolff and Hamilton seem to be in agreement with. As Russell says, with the first double podium for Mercedes, a sign of things hopefully to come. Hamilton says, what a result. Didn't expect to have the result we had today. So everyone's continuing to push, and we're going to keep chasing them down. A bit closer to the Red Bulls, obviously not close enough, but still a pretty impressive result. So Toto Wolff was, of course, talking to the media as well and gave his perspective on the situation, and says that after the shock of the start of the season, they knew that there was no more performance games from that concept. They needed to switch it up. They've obviously taken time to design and bring those upgrades through. And he says, look, after Hamilton overtook Sainz, he was about 5 or 6 seconds behind Max. If they'd have started like next to each other, maybe the gap was 20 seconds, maybe it was 15 seconds, because he also suggested that Hamilton was cruising a bit at the ends, as of course, you know, Verstappen most certainly was. We know there's more pace in the Red Bull. I'd love to see a race where, I think it happened at Austin last year, where Verstappen had a bad pit stop and had to actually try and chase down, and then he had like way more pace in the locker than I was even expecting, which is pretty scary what this Red Bull and Max Verstappen could do if they were fully unleashed. But and we see what Max does when he actually pushes for the fastest lap. I believe Verstappen did a 16.3 for his fastest lap. Hamilton did a 16.6 on his attempt. So it's not massively different in fairness. I think there's a few tenths in it, and definitely the closest, especially on a track like this where Red Bull are so good and have been good in the past and will be good in the future. We need to just chip away. We're very good at grinding. Once there is a development direction, we go for it. There's an advantage with aero time. The conditions today suited us, but what he also said was, the car, we know that this is the right decision. We know that we've gone the right direction, and now it's a matter of just executing on the upgrade plan that we have and continuing to bring performance. So, you know, their intention is, Hamilton said it as well, get to Red Bull by the end of the year. That's the plan. Close the gap by the end of the season, and then they can try and go from there next season. So that's their plan. I think they took a good step towards trying to attempt that for today, and I've just got to say a quick word on Ferrari, because what an absolute disaster class. I don't want to rub salt in the wounds of Leclerc too much, but just to say that in 2020, with a terrible Ferrari, he actually has less points this year. So probably a topic of the coming days, but we'll leave it there for now on them. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.